Have you ever wanted to be a host on an ACA show, or be the one calling the shots behind the scenes? Are you in Austin, Texas, or at least Austin adjacent? Well, on Saturday, February 25th, make your way down to the Free Thought Library because we'll be holding open auditions for show hosts and orientations for prospective crew members. For those wanting to be hosts, you'll be able to sit in the studio where our shows are broadcast and we'll put you through your paces to see if you can be one of the new personalities of the ACA. For future crew members, you'll get hands-on experience using the equipment used for broadcast and will help us record the host auditions. If you've ever dreamed of being part of the ACA productions, then this is your chance to show us what you've got. This event is free. For more information and registration, visit tiny.cc/ACA auditions.
So you think that you can tell us how to live our lives, never questioning the source from which your moral code derives. You think that suffering is part of some great plan that's been devised. I wonder, what will it take for you to start opening your eyes?
Hello, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. Today is February 5th in the year of No Lords 2023. As the stupidest joke I've told all day. I'm your host, Forrest Valkai, and joining me today is Johnny P. Angel. Johnny, how are you doing today?
I'm all right. I'm okay with your joke. I'll allow this one terrible joke before I make my own.
Oh, I believe me, there will be more.
Mhm.
Welcome to the Atheist Experience. Thanks so much for tuning in. The Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And gosh, we're so excited to jump right into the show. So I'm burning through this thing as we've got lines like absolutely full of really cool calls that we want to take. So we'll start popping in. Please feel free to call in with your questions, with comments. If you want to talk about religion, if you want to talk about science, this is the place to do it. So give us a call and tell us what you think. But we're just going to go ahead and just jump right into things. If that's cool with you, Johnny, because we got a million people here on the line.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Dope. All right, so we're going to go right away to Frank calling in from the US of A. Wants to know why we don't hold a belief in God. Frank, you're on the Atheist Experience. How are you doing today?
Hey, it's amazing to be here. It's grateful to have this conversation with you guys. Let's get into it.
Yeah, man. So what exactly did you want to ask?
Well, I don't want to ask anything. I actually want to teach you guys that God is real and God does exist. And when you try to sidestep God with your ideology, you're actually making a huge mistake, not only for your own salvation, but for the wellness of humanity.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So why don't we start with just like the smallest thing is I guarantee every single thing you just said, I could talk about it for 5 minutes. So like, if I don't want to waste all your time. So, the question that I have on the screen here says, why don't we hold a belief in God? Maybe that would be a good place to like jump off from. Cause like that way you can kind of give us a counter. Is that okay with you?
That's fine. I think free will is a big part of that. The reason a lot of people don't believe in God is because they have the will to choose to not believe in God. And that's where you ended up where you are.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with that. I would argue that belief isn't something that you choose. It's something that like kind of happens to you because you don't decide whether to believe something is real or not. You have to have a reason. So like for me, I need evidence for these things. I need a reason to believe that's better than just I want to.
Yeah. To piggyback on your comment, Frank, can you choose to believe that there's a pink elephant floating in the room with you right now using your free will? Can you choose to believe that?
I have that right. I believe I have that right, but is it a plausible belief? I think is the more important question.
Okay, but
right, for sure. Yeah.
So when we talk about creation, right, when we talk about existence, when we talk about things like free will, when we talk about love, when we talk about joy, I mean, I feel like the problem with the atheist perspective is that you guys don't, you have a fundamental misunderstanding about what those things truly are. For me, the spirit is a huge part of the human experience. And let's start there. The spirit.
The spirit.
So
what is
the spirit?
Yeah, what is the spirit?
The spirit is the soul behind our flesh that moves us to make the decisions that we make and to do the things that we do.
Okay, so what's your evidence that such a thing exists?
You know, I'm not going to be able to like show you this in a scientific perspective because that's not the way faith and belief works.
Well, then why does it matter?
Molecules. We're not. Well, it matters because you can't even love someone without an understanding of the spirit.
I love my wife very much, and I don't believe that spirits exist.
That's fine, but what is love to you? Is it like a chemical swirl in your brain, or is it something more?
No, it's pretty much a chemical swirl in my brain. It's a series of electrochemical reactions happening in my head that produce an emotion. She happens to be the only human being in the world that triggers that electrochemical reaction for me that I know of. Who knows? Maybe there'd be somebody else out there too. But like, I know she makes me very happy, and the behaviors and the actions and the beliefs and the her personality, everything that she displays brings that out in me. And so that's all that is. It's a wonderful feeling that, you know, bonds societies. And there's a whole bunch of really cool science behind it. This is something that I can very easily like look to the literature and pull an understanding of. I don't need any kind of magical thinking to understand that, nor do I need magical thinking to enjoy it. Even if I didn't understand it, it's something wonderful that I have. I don't need to add this caveat of, and also there's this other thing called the spirit that I have no reason to believe in as well.
With all due respect, don't you feel like you're missing like a little piece of the puzzle when you reduce it to molecules and chemical reactions? I mean, you know, just
not even a little bit.
Who has lived a life, not even a little bit.
No.
Huh?
No, it's like when people ask me, like, you know, I something that I've heard quite frequently is, you know, well, you as an atheist, you don't see the beauty of like some flower or something like that. You know, there's this beautiful rose in this garden, and you don't get to appreciate what it is because you're trying to break it down and understand its molecules. But that's my job. I'm a biologist. That's what I do. And so I do see this pretty flower. And I see its evolutionary history for the past couple 100 million years. I see the fact that it's got stripings that reflect UV light rather than the visible spectrum that we can see, so that bugs can see it more easily. So it's actually more vivid and more colorful and more dynamic than what I can even see. I see all the chemical pathways going on through it. I see the photosynthetic pathway, whether it's a C3 or a C4 plant or a CAM plant. It's going to have totally different photosynthetic pathways that are going to be spatially or temporally isolated based on their environment for several millions of years. I see like all these amazing intricacies of how it's put together, the atoms that go into it, the way those atoms are connected. I see the different parts of the cell and how they work together and how they function and how it builds into its ecosystem. And it's also pretty. So I see so much beauty plus the aesthetic. And so when I look at love, I see this amazing story of like how the brain works and how humanity works and how relationships work. And I see like the triggering that she does in my brain and like what she does to me. And also it feels nice. So like, I think that I see so much more. If anything, you're missing out. You're missing out on the beauty of reality.
You think I'm missing out? You don't think it's you? You think it's me?
I am teasing you a little bit, but at the end of the day, I don't think I'm missing out at all. No, I think I see so much more, and I think I'm enjoying it just as much as you, if not more, because I also see the background.
Yeah, but like part of, you know, it's not always about enjoying things. I mean, sometimes you have to do the right thing, even if it's a little uncomfortable.
Sure, absolutely, and I can make justification for that as well without magic.
Yeah, and you need magical thinking for that to be the case. You don't think that Forrest has an understanding of the rights and responsibilities that he owes to his partner without a sense of magic to it?
I have a qualm with you guys describing the belief, or we'll call it theism. We can call it belief in God. You call it whatever you want to call it, but to call it magic, I think is not being genuine.
We're not. To be clear, we're not calling the belief magic. We're saying you believe in magic. You're believing in something supernatural that's, you know, becoming intercessory into our lives through means that are not scientifically explainable. That's magic.
And my what I'm trying to tell you is that not everything can be explained through science, and I think that's very clear. Unless you disagree,
Not.
I'm willing to listen.
There are some things that we haven't explained in science yet.
Mm-hmm.
I have yet to be convinced that there isn't anything that can't be explained through science.
Yeah, where do you get your basis for saying that it cannot be explained through science? That sounds like a conclusion. How did you arrive at that conclusion?
Well, belief. It's the idea of belief. It takes a tiny leap of faith sometimes. Sometimes it takes a large leap of faith, but nonetheless, I mean, belief always takes a little bit of faith.
Okay.
So my question to you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, what is your definition of faith then?
It's belief. It's the idea that maybe you don't understand it 100%, but you're willing to accept it.
But there is evidence to support a particular conclusion, yes?
But do you always need, I mean, is that your worldview, that you need evidence for everything that you know you're going to believe in life? Or
it's my question, Frank, that there needs to be some evidence for it, right? You don't just believe things because it's a thing that's believable. Everything that you believe
let's talk about,
is based upon.
Let's talk about
Frank, you're evading the question.
No, I'm addressing the question. Let's talk about faith, or trust, rather. It's something that you can't really prove, right? But it's something you believe in. That's the whole idea behind trust. Do you trust nothing?
So the question then is there any position whatsoever that you could not take on faith?
I think if you can disprove faith, fine, go for it. But I think you're going to have a tall order ahead of you.
Well, that's not what I asked. I asked, is there anything at all that you could not believe in based on faith?
No. Faith is not a matter of disbelief. Faith is a matter of belief. So
for sure, absolutely. So now, coming from a skeptical standpoint, like, what sort of things could you not believe in based on a skeptical worldview or a scientific worldview? You know, the list is as long as you'd like. I don't believe in unicorns or gremlins or the Russell's teapot or that the Earth is flat or any of these things, because I have evidence against these things. I don't have evidence for something existing, so I don't believe it exists, or I have sufficient evidence that something does exist, so I believe that it does. Like, that's the way that I work with everything. And in fact, I'm 99% sure that's the way that you work with everything else as well. It's just in this one area that now you have this special set of rules called faith. You said I have no faith?
Dude, I don't want to get into this like the way you're addressing this argument. I think it's important to have faith. And
why don't you want to get into the Frank, why don't you want to get into the way we're addressing this argument? Is it because you don't have a good answer for the way that we're approaching it, and that you want to skip over it and jump back into whatever script or proselytizing you want to get into? Or is it for some other reason?
No, that's not the reason. The reason is faith is it's a very important aspect of the human experience, not the atheist experience, the human experience.
Why is it important?
Because that's the way society functions. I mean, when you're driving down the road in your car, you have faith that people aren't just going to swerve into your lane and kill you.
I have a reasonable.
No, I don't.
I have a reasonable.
I absolutely don't. Yeah. I learned defensive driving. Yeah. I make sure to look around and make sure if anybody because people have swerved into my lane before. I keep my eyes open for that. I'm not going to just trust everybody on faith. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, and Frank, I have a reasonable expectation that most people are going to be trying to drive their car because they are motivated to get to their destination and to continue living. I don't close my eyes and just drive based upon some notion of belief or unfounded faith, as you might put it, because I want it to be so. I have a reasonable expectation that's based upon my experiences, and my experience is much the same. I've been in car accidents as well. So it's proportionate to my experiences. I know that stuff could hit the fan at any time. And so I put my seatbelt on. I have insurance for my car. I keep my hands on the wheel and my eyes on the road. And I try to maintain speed with the traffic around me. That's not faith. That's, I don't know. I don't know what that is.
That's just
What is
being a
that?
decent
What do
human
you call
being.
it? Obeying the
That's,
laws? Maybe?
that's just being, then that's being responsible is what that is.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And that's the point that I was saying a second ago is that, like, you don't use faith for most things in your life, Frank. Like I don't think that there are very many things around you that you could point to that you just have a blind belief in because you feel like it. Most everything, if I told you that,
wait, I have to stop you. I have to stop you there for a second because, like, that's one of my like gigantic pet peeves with a lot of religious people. Blind faith.
Okay.
Faith for me has been something I've struggled with a lot. I had to think about a lot. I had to look at the science. I had to look at the reality. I had to draw my own intuitive beliefs from it. It was not something that came to me like I just snap of the fingers. Okay, it was something that I had to struggle with and fight with, and then eventually,
but you are arguing for something that you don't have actual concrete evidence for, and that you don't have a scientific perspective on. So you are arguing for the idea that at some point,
if you guys want to talk about,
we've already been going for 13 minutes. I encourage you to call back when I'm on and talk about DNA with me. I would love to do so. But as far as just this one point, which is all we have time for, is that you are arguing for something that your best answer is, I don't have an answer, and therefore it must be something supernatural.
No, that's not true.
And that's not good enough.
I think when you look, when we look at the complexity, and the atheist kind of, what do they call it? The red herring. The atheist red herring is that, just because it's complex and we can't understand it, therefore, theists claim that creation is, but that's not the way it actually works. When you look at the nature of the complexity, the idea that there's a language behind this molecule, there's a language behind our voices. That's what really drives this idea. I mean, and I think that's that's probably some of the best evidence we have for creation.
And I have been studying that language at universities for almost a decade now, and there's nothing supernatural about it. So just because something seems interesting, it doesn't mean that it's supernatural. It doesn't mean that there's a God behind it. And even if you could say for sure that, pick your favorite, DNA, human eyes, language, the solar system, photosynthesis, any random thing that's so amazingly, astoundingly complex, even if you could prove that we have no explanation for it, and that the best explanations we have completely just fail to do anything, and that we just have no way of knowing how this amazingly complex thing came into existence, that's not an argument for creationism or for God or for belief or any of that. All you could then say is, I don't have an explanation for this. And then you have your whole work cut out for you trying to go find one. Because when you have an explanation for something, or a proposed explanation, you need evidence to back it up. So our explanations of biodiversity, of evolution, of the origin of life, of DNA and language, and whatever else you want to point to, our explanations of those things are based in the evidence that we have. If we had different evidence, we'd have a different explanation. Your basis of what you're saying here is, this is so amazing, it must be magical. And that's just not good enough for a belief system.
That's actually, you're doing the red herring thing again. There's
I just repeated what you said
scientifically, and that
doesn't matter. I just explained why that doesn't matter. Okay. Yes, we can explain it, but even if we couldn't, that isn't an argument for God. You have to do the work of proving this God exists, and then prove that it can make things like DNA, and then prove that it did make DNA, and then start proving how. Those are the steps you have to take to get me to believe in this God, based on DNA or whatever. You can't just say, you don't have a good explanation, therefore you have to go with mine. That's not how science or thinking works.
You're diminishing life in this kind of simplistic context where it's like you're looking at a computer basically, and you can understand how the transistors in there and the RAM and the processor and the hard drive all kind of work together, but you're forgetting the bigger picture, which is that life has a purpose. That a computer was designed with a reason and a purpose, and I think if you're going to look at it like that, then I think that's a good place to maybe start for an analogy to try to get you guys on the right track.
So this will be the last thing, is we are running out of time with this call. You said just now that life has a purpose. Why do you believe that? What evidence do you have for that? I think that sounds horrible. I don't believe there's a purpose for life, and I certainly don't want a purpose for life. That sounds awful. So, like, what makes you think there's a purpose for life?
What makes you think there isn't? Just to play devil's advocate.
From where would we derive such a purpose? What does that even mean to say purpose? Do you mean like that there's like a function, or do you mean like there's an intention of life existing? Like somebody made life on purpose to do a thing?
Yeah, like why is that so hard to believe?
Because I have no reason to believe that there's a God, and even if there was a God, I wouldn't worship it, because any God that would run a world like this is clearly a monster, and also because I don't want to be told what to live for. I don't want to be born in a situation where I have a purpose. That sounds hideous to me, to have my whole life, no freedom, no choices, nothing for me, just no matter what I do, no matter what I try, it's all for this intention that somebody else set out for me before I was born. That sounds hideous. That's awful. But again, that's not an argument against it. It's just why I think it's shitty. Like, at the end of the day, I just don't have evidence to believe that it's real, so I don't.
Yeah, and I noticed that, Frank, when we asked what your evidence was that there was a purpose, you flipped it.
I wanted to get into the DNA molecule, but you guys don't want to talk about it. You guys don't want to talk.
We don't have time for it.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to do
20 minutes on this call.
Yeah, it sounds like you want to do a lot of things, Frank. But every time we ask you a question, you just flip it and ask us a question in return. That's kind of not how it works.
I was ready to answer
you've got,
question, but
okay, so why do you think that there is a purpose? Why do you think that there is a purpose? We said why we don't want there to be a purpose. I certainly don't want an overlord slave master, but apparently that's more appealing to you. But why do you think that there is a purpose?
All right. Well, let's start from what does it mean for you? What does purpose
Again,
mean
you asked a question. I'd like to hear what your answer
Well,
is.
if we're gonna argue about purpose, we need to define it, I think, is what I'm after.
Dude, we've been on this call for 20 minutes, and I've got a million other callers waiting. So I'm trying to so we got to get an answer out of you, because like Johnny just said, every time you ask us a question, we give you an answer. And every time we ask you a question, you ask us another question.
Frank, you're good. You're good and squirrely when it comes to answering questions, but don't think that it's not seen. Go ahead and answer the question, or we have to move on.
All right, what's your question?
What evidence do you have that life has a purpose?
We need to talk about the DNA molecule. We need to talk about the way it's a structured language. In the beginning, there was the word. This is John 1:1.
I have studied the DNA molecule. It's not a great language for a few reasons, and also there's no reason to believe that it's supernatural whatsoever. It actually shows clear evidence of evolution written into your DNA. And I use written here as an analogy, not like there's actually some. I feel I should be clear. So like DNA is absolutely not a good evidence or argument for a creator if you study DNA.
You don't think so? You don't think it's a 4-character language?
Very much no.
Okay. Well, what's your evidence for that? Why you sit here and judge me about evidence?
You said that DNA isn't a forebearer to language? I need you. Is that what you're at? There,
no,
because we can't.
Is DNA not a language? Is there not a word there?
I mean, you could colloquially call it a code, but like the way DNA is like actually functioned into like the way that it does a thing is through transcription, converting DNA, reading DNA to make an RNA molecule. Then that RNA has to mature. It has to have exons cut out and then introns spliced together. And then that mature mRNA then has to be translated into a protein in sets of 3 codons that correspond to amino acids. And like this, it's this hierarchical step-by-step process. It is a biochemical process. It's not a language in reality. That's just an analogy. It's a way that we describe it. Same way with saying like a code. It's just an analogy. It's not like there's actually like a set digitized sequence where you have this exact thing. Like it's a very complicated system, but it's not a precursor to language. It's not a language in and of itself. No, that's not how that works.
Are you like you said you're a biologist, right?
Yes, I have multiple degrees in biology. I'm currently finishing my master's in bioanthropology. I study and teach biology for a living.
So, when God said that He created man and women separate, are you gonna? Do you have a biological argument against that?
That is a completely different thing, and we are 23 minutes into this call.
It was
So
a little bit of a pivot. I understand it.
If you'd like, Frank, you are welcome to call back in anytime that either Johnny or I are on and continue this conversation. But like so far, we've been going 23 minutes and we haven't gotten anywhere. So I'm going to move on to the next caller. But I appreciate you calling in. Please, if you want to continue talking about any of this, call us back.
Thanks.
Take care.
Frank. Bye.
That went nowhere slowly. Before we move on to the next call, if you like what we do here at the Atheist Experience and you'd like to support us, there's a few ways you can support the Atheist Experience and the ACA as a whole. You can become a member of this channel for as little as 99 cents a month. Just click the join button down below this video and that'll give you access to special chat emojis. Everybody in the chat, please throw out some of those special chat emojis. That'll be really cool of you. Show everybody what they're missing out on. The Atheist Experience is also just one of the many shows put on by the ACA. So make sure to check out some of the other shows as well. There's Secular Sexuality on Thursdays. With the incomparable Christy Powell. There is, let's see here, Truth Wanted live on Fridays with the amazing Objectively Dan. And then we have our Sunday shows, which Talk Heathen at 1 p.m. Central, the nonprofits right before this one at 3 p.m. Central. And you can support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonAXP. Those are all things that you can do to support this channel, this show, and all the other shows that come along with it. And with that, we've got, oh my God, we have a huge amount of callers. Yeah. But I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that last one because we've got another one that sounds pretty cool. And I think we were just kind of on it a little bit. We've got Mark from New York. Pronouns are he, him, wants to talk about intelligent design. Mark, how are you doing today?
Hey, what's going on, man?
How are you? I'm having a fantastic day. I'm excited to hear what you have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yes. You know what? Let me not watch the YouTube channel and listen to it on the phone like I was directed to.
I appreciate you figuring that out before we had to tell you. So many people were like, I can hear myself 80 times.
Yeah. So actually, I did want to talk to Forrest about something, and it's Johnny. I don't think we've ever spoken before. I'm not sure if you also have a background in biology. So,
I certainly don't, except for being a biological organism. That's about it.
That experience.
So, Forrest, we spoke, it was maybe like a week ago, and I mentioned we were discussing intelligent design and the origin of life research that's been going on, and sort of, I mentioned Dr. Tor to you.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what's been going on, and I think it's helpful because I think sometimes you need to, in order to like get the truth to come out, you need to have people. You need the adversarial context for that to happen, and which is I think how the scientific process is supposed to work. But sometimes like there's somewhat of a dogma that happens within science, and certain things kind of become taboo, and people within the scientific community who hold views that are kind of on the periphery of the consensus position, like often have to like kind of get through that logjam. And I think there's just like a history of that happening. Like even when you just look back in the 20th century, like in physics and cosmology, like eventually the truth does come out, but it often is like it's often like a winding path for that to happen. And I think in particular, like what's happened with the intelligent design hypothesis is that they've kind of been somewhat, I don't even know, they've kind of been ostracized. Like there's people who have submitted, like Stephen Meyer, like published a paper in one of the journals that the Smithsonian publishes. I forgot what it's called. And the editor of that journal basically got like fired. His entire career was destroyed because
right. Do you know why that's the case though? Do you know why people who promote intelligent design are ostracized and why those papers don't get published, and when they do, it's a bad time?
Why?
It's because intelligent design is not a theory. It's just religion playing science. It's the newest way of saying creationism that sounds almost scientific, and it's something which has no scientific basis. The entire intelligent design argument is, I don't have a way of explaining X, therefore God. And that's it. And like I said to the last caller, even if you take, Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe and James Tour and all these other people who many of them are, very, like all three of the people I just listed have PhDs in some sort of science or another, except for I think Stephen Meyer does philosophy of science, whatever it is.
Right.
These are educated people. They're not dumb, but their whole job is to say, I don't know how this happened, and therefore my Christian belief system is founded. And that's not how scientific thinking works. And they, of all people, should know that very well. So whenever you have these people trying to promote their belief system, the reason why it doesn't go over very well is because that's not how you structure any argument ever in science. Even if they could prove entirely that evolution made no sense whatsoever, that there was absolutely no explanation for the biodiversity that we see around us, then all they would be able to say is, I have no explanation for biodiversity. If they wanted to prove God and that there's this creationist or intelligent design idea, they would first have to prove that this God exists, then prove that it did create everything, then prove that it, or I should say, prove that it can create everything, then that it did, and then start talking about how. So, like, when you put your God on my dissection table, we'll talk. But until then, all you have is, I don't get how this works, therefore I have a better explanation, and it happens to be the exact one that I was born into and raised to believe in the right interpretation of the right translation of the right book that's been interpreted and translated for the past 2,000 years, and I got the right one. And it's just not a scientific argument at all.
That was a lot to process. What's your response to that?
Okay, so my response to that is that there's a very fine line. I agree with Forrest that they're really riding up against what I think. I don't agree. I'm trying to be objective, and I do believe in God. I sort of want, more in their camp, and I want them to be right. But I'm really trying to be objective, and I think like with the way Stephen Meyer approaches the issue, I think it goes right up into the line. But I don't really think it's fair to call what he's doing like a pseudoscience, like to just lump him in with the creationists, because he really is careful in what Meyer's approach is that he basically took this from Darwin, where Darwin was looking back historically to try to postulate a cause. And his method was, if you're trying to basically come up with a cause for an event in the distant past, what you could do is look at causes that are that are present, like present causes that are known to produce the same effect as the cause that you're trying to explain for that distant event. And so this was like in The Origin of Species. I'm probably not doing a great job of describing it, but Meyer explains this by basically saying like a kind of a light bulb went off for him and he's taking that same approach that Darwin used for evolution, and applies it for intelligent design.
So two things. Number one, you're talking about that there's this cause, that you can see reproduces the same results over and over and over again. What results do we have from this God that we can prove?
No, so for example, there's a really interesting interview with Richard Dawkins. Ben Stein interviewed him for this movie, and he asked him this question.
Are you talking about Expelled?
Exactly.
Ben Stein's movie where he compares teaching evolution in colleges to the literal Holocaust.
No, I actually didn't. I didn't hear that part. I mean, I don't remember that part of the movie. There's a part of that movie.
Yeah, it's right at the beginning.
He interviews Dawkins. Oh, it is. Wait, he compares what?
He compares the fact that universities force professors to teach evolution and doesn't allow them to teach creationism to fucking Nazis. That's like how he opens the film, if I remember correctly.
Okay, well, that's crazy. I mean, I can't.
Yeah,
that sounds crazy. But he interviews Dawkins, and at one point Dawkins basically says, like, no, it could be like a space alien, like the panspermia hypothesis. So it doesn't have to be God. It's the intelligent design argument is not like a theistic. It's consistent with theism, but it doesn't say the Christian God did it. It's just saying there was design, and we kind of pushes it back to saying we don't know who the designer was. It could have been
but I think you're putting way too much credit to the word could. It could be aliens. It could be a god. It could be that this whole world is a dream that I'm having right now and that I'll wake up in a few minutes. It could be that this is a video game I forgot I was playing that's very realistic. Could doesn't mean probable, likely, any of that. At the end of the day, all of science could be an illusion that was created by Satan, that he put the light at just the right distance to make it look like the universe is as old as it is, and he put fossils in the ground to make us believe it. Sure, why not? Right. But that doesn't mean that's a reasonable thing to believe. There could be gremlins in my attic instead of mice, but I don't believe that.
No, absolutely. You need epistemic warrants for your beliefs. You can't. It's not enough to just say something is possible and therefore that's not a reason to believe something. I'm just saying because just bringing it back to what we were talking about, Meyer took Darwin's approach and tried to apply it to the origin of life. And in response, you said something about well, how do you know it was God? And I was just basically saying he wasn't saying this was God. He was just, the argument is just there's a designer, and that one of the inferences it's an abductive argument which there's multiple competing hypotheses. One could be evolution. It could have been the process of random mutation and all that. And this is an alternative hypothesis. And, I haven't read Meyer's books, but the way I understand he goes about it is that he looks at what is the probability of when you look at this, the probability sort of the search space of what this is something that the prior caller was talking about, when you have the DNA molecule, and that, I guess, number one, there's this challenge for evolution, which is what is the origin of biological information? Where does that information originate from? And do you have an answer for that, Forrest, or?
Yes. So when you talk about biological information, I'm assuming you're talking about nucleic acids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We find, so DNA and RNA are made of 5 nitrogenous bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, and uracil. We found literally all 5 of those on meteors in space. They self-assemble by themselves. They don't need magic to do that, and they polymerize and chain together by themselves. They don't need magic to do that. And also, depending on which one you're going for, I'm a big fan of the RNA world hypothesis. RNA can work as both genetic information and also as a catalyst for lots of biochemical reactions. So it would be not only the information carrying molecule, but also the thing that's causing a lot of life to happen. Case in point, when I talked about DNA transcription and translation, you transcribe DNA into mRNA, that's the messenger RNA that goes out and encodes for a protein. mRNA is read by a ribosome. Ribosomes are made of RNA, rRNA. Those ribosomes then connect to transfer RNA, which bring over the amino acids to build the protein. So RNA tells RNA which RNA to connect to build the proteins. So like, yeah, this is all stuff that you can do in a jar. None of this is magical.
Well, no, it's well, the issue is that the origin of life, like, I mean, when they looked at the cell, like when you have like for example, like this is, again, I'm not somebody like who's very knowledgeable in this field, but when you looked at the Miller-Urey experiment from the 1950s, where they tried to basically replicate like some of the prebiotic conditions on the early Earth, there were so many, like, if you look, that was in the 1950s. And if you look at like where we are now, like generally science, like, inches forward towards, it makes progress. It's incremental progress. Sometimes it's slow, but it usually moves towards the goalpost. And what seems to be happening in this field of research is that they're actually making like reverse progress. Like they've discovered that the cell is so much more complex than we ever imagined. And they're nowhere near, like, it's not like they've gotten closer to describing the origin of life. They're further away from describing the origin of life, because as they keep learning more in this area, they keep realizing like the difficulty of life originating through purely, random processes. Now, it's either we know life.
That's not true.
On Earth, so why do you say that? Like for the RNA world hypothesis, for example, like that's been out for a while. Like that was like 2005, wasn't it? And I don't think.
Like, here's the thing: is that number one, Urey and Miller did their famous experiment, yes, in the 1950s, and they showed that amino acids self-assemble from very basic, ordinary chemicals you find all over the universe under remarkably mundane conditions. That was also 70 years ago. And we've done a lot of other things like that since then, which have consistently over and over shown that not just amino acids, but all of the basic building blocks of life self-assemble under remarkably mundane conditions. So, like, for example, we just talked about the five nitrogenous bases of nucleic acid. We have all the amino acids here. We've also found amino acids on asteroids in space. The things that make lipids. There's four major biological macromolecules: nucleic acids, proteins, lipids, and carbohydrates. So nucleic acids and proteins we've covered. Right. Lipids and carbohydrates made of fatty acids and sugars, respectively. Again, self-assemble. Again, we found them in space. And also the way that all of those things chain together and polymerize is not a mystery to us. So, like, even if, like, there are certain gaps in our knowledge, because you're right, we have found that things are very, very complex, and there's certain things that we don't understand yet. But, like, we have step 1, step 2, step 3, we're missing step 4, and then we have 5 through 100. And so, like, if you want to say, well, you don't have step 4, and that means that's God, what are you going to do in 20 years when we find step 4? Because right now you're making the same argument that was made 30 years ago when we didn't have step 7 or 8 either. And then we found those. And then you're like, but step 4! And like, that's just not good enough. And that's why, again, intelligent design is not a theory. It's just, I don't know how this works, therefore Jesus. And that's not science.
I want to pop in real quick. Mark,
please do. I feel like I've been talking this whole time.
No, it's good. I'm not a scientician. Nor do I pretend to be one on YouTube. But I can tell you this, something that you said, Mark, that stuck out to me 50 to 90 hours ago when we started this call, was that you wanted to believe the intelligent design community were onto something, that you had, it sounded like you had a vested interest in that being sort of the underdog, rising to the top and coming to the fore of the scientific consensus in some way. And to me, that said a lot. And I knew that there was a lot of science, and so Forrest is certainly the man for that. Why do you want that to be the scientific consensus? What is your personal motivation for that being the prevailing theory for life?
That's a very good question. I mean, I really don't know, actually. Like, it's a great question. I mean, some of it is like, honestly, like, some of this gets somewhat tribal, where, like, you know, like, people who are on one side, where you're defending like claims, and sometimes like people on the other side who have like an opposing view, you kind of like, you don't, I mean, I'm competitive, and so like I want to win.
Yeah.
I want to be right. I want to win the argument. And so, like, you know, if I think God exists, and this is like a sort of metaphysical theory / I know Forrest doesn't want to call it a scientific theory, but to the extent, you know, it falls into that category, like, it's something that is consistent with the God hypothesis. And so, you know, I'm kind of hoping that's correct. If it's
you're
not,
hoping that's correct. Mark, it sounds like you're motivated through some sort of personal identity issue. It sounds like you have put your flag on the ground of theism. You staked it out, and you say, this is my position, this is my side, and I'm going to defend it, and I have a personal motivation for this being the truth. And I would suggest that maybe if you could let go of that tribalism that you have identified, if you've let go of that sort of egotism or egoism, I can never remember which one's which, and just look at the study, look at the how the science is progressing, look at it not in terms of working backward from a conclusion, but following the evidence where it leads. Instead of just trying to fight to win, you might get at a different understanding of the world. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily the non-believer in God's position, but I am. But I'm also saying that you're spinning your wheels trying to justify your side winning. Maybe just let go of that, and try another method.
I mean, you're right.
I know.
I've said that
before. I'm sorry. I did that. I used that one already. I know. I'm sorry. Go on. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, like, you're right. I mean, we have to. Self-deception is always like the biggest risk, that we're just deceiving ourselves into believing something, you know, that's like, so Mark, I totally agree with you.
Mark, I don't know any of the stuff. Somebody in the chat said, oh, Johnny knows this stuff as well as Forrest. No, he doesn't. I don't know. All I can tell you is that I've never been convinced of a God claim. It's always shoddy evidence. And you and Forrest can talk about all this amazing discoveries, not through the process of theology have we reached this, but by close investigation of the actual world around us. We have looked at DNA, and we've looked at biological processes and physiological things that are going on. Yeah, I sound like a real noob because I don't know any of this stuff, but I can tell you your position that a God done it has less explanatory power than we don't know. And we're kind of spinning wheels here. And another thing, last thing I'm going to say, and I think Forrest is going to want to take us someplace else. You haven't read the work of the people that you're citing to. Don't you think that might be something you should do before you call an atheist call-in show?
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, I haven't read the book, but I've absorbed the material through like lectures and like, you know, listening to them speak. And so like, but no, absolutely. Like, that's something I plan on doing. I have other books, you know, like on my list. And I think it's through, I mean, the reason I'm calling is because like, I want to test the veracity of my beliefs, and, you know, just talking to people that hold the same beliefs as you do, like, you're not going to do that probably as effectively. But, you know, because I know you guys want to talk to somebody else soon. I was just going to mention that Dr. Tor is not actually an intelligent design advocate. He is associated with the Discovery Institute, but because of the reasons that Forrest mentioned, like Dr. Tor basically said, like, I'm a synthetic chemist, he's an organic chemist, and he's basically like, intelligent design doesn't give me the tools in which to measure, like, whether, like, I guess he kind of has like a testability issue with it he's wearing the hat of a chemist. So he's not an intelligent designer. But what he's doing is reviewing the work of people in the Origin Life community and sort of like, I don't want to use this in a pejorative way, but he's kind of exposing them because they're really making these, like, he basically puts it as like they're deceiving people. They're making these claims that are just so broad and unsubstantiated. And then when he gets into reading the papers, he's like, he spots all these issues. And so this is all kind of going on right now, like over the YouTube channels where he's putting out a series of videos. And I would just, I would encourage not just you two gentlemen, but just the listeners of the show to engage with that material. Just as,
and also I would encourage everybody listening to go listen to other professional PhD chemists who have come out against everything that Dr. Tour is saying and like call them out for not actually teaching real estate. See, I'm not a chemist, so I don't propose to like tear into Dr. Tour. I can tell you that when I took organic chemistry in college, Dr. Green did not need to rely on anything that Dr. Tour was saying to make sense of his arguments. So shout out to you, Dr. Green. You were the best freaking chemistry professor ever. But with that, we're going to move on because I'm not trying to make this show just an advertisement for James Tour. But Mark, feel free to call back anytime. We'll talk more about why life doesn't need a biological supernatural explanation. Take care.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
So really quick, before we move on, we've got a couple of things. I've got a bunch of announcements, and then we also have a bunch of people who are putting in super chats, and I want to read some of those really quickly. So I'm going to go through the super chats very quickly, and then I'm going to go into an announcement very quickly, and then we've got a promo to show you, and then we're going to move on to the next call. It's going to be a busy in between time here. We got a lot going on. So first of all, we've got Mike L.A. Whaley says, talking about the first caller, his God knew that we would deny his existence and yet punishes us for eternity for something that it already knew, right? That's one thing that bothers me about this whole idea that God is all-knowing. So then this God knew that I would be an atheist and knew that I would go to hell, and that's still part of the plan. So this God makes humans with the intention of sending them to hell. The purpose of my life is to go to hell. What? We've got the Stop Motionator says, Forrest, what's your opinion on the romanticism when talking about science? It's a useful tool to get people interested. You shouldn't put it in a paper. Don't write, if you're doing scientific research, don't write about how cool something is. But when you're talking to an audience, absolutely tell them so they become scientists too. Mike L.A. Whaley says, apologist 0, atheist 1. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Then we've got, let's see, we had a couple more. Here we go. Brian Alaspa. Man, I learned more listening to 1 minute of Forrest than all my years of science in school. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. Quit talking about me in the super chats. You got Western New York Bigfoot Investigation Group says, I wish I had Forrest a science teacher when I was a child. I've been talking too much this episode if all these are about me. I'm an old man now, but I've learned so much more from him about biology and evolution. Thank you very much. That's incredibly kind of you. And then James Gall says, solve step 4, but what about step 201? Exactly. Now you're starting to think like a creationist. And then we've got, there it is. Here's my pop-up boy. We've got a quick promotional thing to show you because I want to tell you that the ACA hosts several other shows other than the Atheist Experience, including the nonprofit Secular Sexuality, Truth, One and Talk Heathen. And if you didn't catch those shows from last week, then here's a taste of the things that you probably want to go back and watch.
Like, is there a swimsuit competition? I know it's not Miss Universe.
Like 4 days of amazing gay leather pageantry.
Yes.
And I'm talking like down home.
Doing it.
Down home Texas pageant. Plus bear, plus gay.
And they were trying to reconcile modern quantum physics with Eastern mysticism. Okay. And they did a really good job of it, right? I mean, it was all bull, right?
Wait, so why did they do a good job of it?
Because they made it sound reasonable.
Okay.
So, in our second segment, just like Richard said, we're going to be traveling down to 1950. I'm hearing from my producers it's actually Florida in 2023. Hard to tell the difference, my bad.
And they have to be match up perfectly.
Okay.
And when I'm looking at those two things, they match up perfectly.
Wow, that's great. Well, that's wonderful. I think you should tell NASA and then come back to us.
I'm not telling anybody.
But
Well, you're telling
why are you
us?
telling us?
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Well, guys.
Talk to you
All right,
later.
take care.
Bye. He called me young.
I wasn't going to say, really young. Can you provide some evidence of that claim? Because I don't see.
All right. And now with that, we're going to jump right into the next call because we've got, oh my God, we have like 3, 6, now we have like 15 people on the line here. I'm trying to get through as many as we can. We're not going to be able to cover everybody, but we've got somebody who's been waiting for like an hour and I want to get him on here. We've got Mike from Florida. No pronouns given, says your arguments about Christianity are wrong. Mike, how are you doing today?
They're wrong. Hey, I'm doing good, man. How you guys doing?
Great.
I'm all right, dude.
Finally
Thanks for
got
calling
through.
in. So what specifically did you want to talk about today? I'm sorry you had to wait so long.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. You know, like I said, I'm a Christian. You know, I found out I was theist by watching your show. I didn't know they had a name for it. I've always been a Christian. I thought that's what it was. You just believe in God. I just found out I was a theist.
Yeah,
Isn't
yeah.
that something?
Yeah, it turns out there's lots of gods to believe in.
But,
yeah.
No, there's only actually one, believe it or not.
Oh.
And that's one of there's you're a Christian.
There you go.
Believe that.
Yeah. So our arguments against
And there's only
Christianity.
one God. I guess my point would be that God is real, most definitely. Jesus is real. The Holy Spirit is real, and the devil is real. And I guess that's why I said you guys' arguments are wrong.
Okay. All right. So what are our arguments?
Yeah.
Give us one of our arguments.
Well, you say it doesn't exist. Well, I heard you one time. You made an argument that if God did exist, he was such a terrible person.
Yeah.
If even if you could prove God is real, I still
that's
wouldn't
what I'm
worship
talking
it.
about. I heard on one of your tapes you say that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Even if you could
if
prove
he,
this God is real, I have no interest in it whatsoever.
Yeah.
I got you. Why you say that?
For a lot of reasons, actually.
I guess I'm kind of curious to know what the atheist position is. Why is there such a, I don't know, how can I put this, a hardness towards the existence of God?
If you want the atheist position, I can give you that. If you're asking just my personal set on it, like the atheist position is simply, I have no evidence for this. Like that's. Yeah, so I'll wrap them both up really quickly. I'll be as succinct as I can because I want to make sure I know Johnny's probably got a lot to say about this too.
I do.
Is that the atheist position overall is simply that we don't believe there's a God, and there's a few ways to do this, and there's a lot of different weird language, just like with theism. Like there's a million different ways you can explain this and classify different types of atheists and things like that. But really, what it boils down to is if I tell you that there's an elephant on the other side of this bookshelf, you can either say, yes, there is, no, there isn't, or I don't believe you.
Right.
If you say, yes, there is, or no, there isn't, you need evidence to back that up. You're making a truth claim. You're making a statement about something in reality. If you just say, I don't believe you, then you're waiting for me to give you the evidence, right? It's like if I told you I had Red Lobster for dinner last night, you probably don't need much evidence. If you wanted some, I could show you a receipt or something, you know what I mean? But if I tell you I can fly, then you need more evidence than just, a pair of windproof sweatpants or whatever.
Fly every day like I order Red Lobster.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's how it is with this God thing. If you're telling us of something magical, that there's this supernatural being out there that can create life and universe and all stuff, we need a lot more evidence besides I read it in the Bible. That's just not good enough. And then you ask me why I would not believe in or why I would not worship this God, why I'm so against this God. And that usually comes down to the gods on offer.
Right there. Let me stop you for a second.
Sure.
I heard the argument, and I do want to address that. Why? But the first part on God's existence.
Yeah. By all means, don't let me overwhelm you with a bunch of different things.
Right. I got you. Well, I guess how would you explain somebody like me then, who's so sure that he does exist?
I'm assuming you were. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say you've been convinced by bad arguments.
Yeah.
You have drawn
really?
conclusions from evidence.
Okay.
Yeah, you have drawn conclusions from experiences that I would say are insufficient to convince me of your conclusions. Yeah.
And let's be
I
very clear, Mike.
understand.
That's not an insult to you.
No.
That's the state of the being for most people. We live in a culture where faith is considered a virtue, and where a lot of people don't understand that you can be a good person without having a religion. And you probably were raised in a Christian household. I'm guessing just by probability. You were probably raised either by Christians or around Christians, or in an area with a lot of Christian churches. And so you were indoctrinated with Christian ideology, Christian imagery. I know for sure if you grew up here in America, there's Christian imagery freaking everywhere, and it's really difficult to disassociate from that. So you were brought up in a culture and probably in a family that endorsed Christianity.
Gotcha. Let me tell you, all of that is wrong. Okay. I discovered the truth of the Gospels in October 6, 1995. It was actually a specific date. I was brought up in a Christian household.
So you did not grow up in a Christian society surrounded by Christian imagery?
Right, exactly. So I was, well, there was imagery, but I didn't believe in God up until that point in time. So the imagery had no effect on me.
Right, but I'm just saying that, like, if you were born and raised in, Iraq, you probably would have found the truth of the Quran rather than the truth of the Bible. And if you were born in ancient Greece, you probably would have found the miraculous truth of Zeus around the same time. It's a lot to do with like social conditioning and indoctrination.
What you're trying to suggest is cultural indoctrination. And I'm not subject to anything like that. No, that's not it.
No, you're immune to cultural indoctrination?
Hold on.
Cool.
I didn't say I was immune to it. I'm saying that's not the reason why I come to understand that the Gospels are true and that God is real.
Right.
What I'm trying to say, first of all, I want you guys to know something about me. I'm going to be bitterly honest with you. I'm not the kind of person that's going to sit here and try to prove my position by some type of evidence or this and that and the other. The only thing I can do is testify to what I understand is the truth. Okay? So if I'm going to be bitterly honest with you, and you're going to tell me everything that you know and your expertise and everything that you've learned in atheism, then we should be able to prove that I'm wrong. Because if I'm not wrong, then you have to be wrong. Is that right? Am I not correct?
No, that's not how that works.
No?
No, you
go
don't.
ahead.
You don't. It does work that way.
Yeah, you.
Hold on, wait a minute.
No, it doesn't.
You don't prove a negative.
If God is real,
Mike, why don't you wait a minute?
I don't know about you guys. Are
Mike, why don't I go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and mute you, Mike. If you won't wait a minute, you're muted, Mike. I want you to go ahead and prove there is not a unicorn in my garage right now. You are unmuted, Mike. Now I'll wait for you.
You want me to prove? Okay. You want me to prove that there's not a unicorn in your garage?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if there is a unicorn in your garage. You might have taken a horse and put a horn on him. I don't know what's in your garage. Do I believe in unicorns?
No, he means a real unicorn.
A real
means
unicorn.
An actual, true. You drink its blood, you become immortal. It farts rainbows.
No, because there's no such thing as unicorns.
I'll prove it. Go ahead.
But there is.
Yeah,
there is one. There's one in his garage.
In my garage, Mike.
Yeah.
Come on.
Are you suggesting that because I understand God is real, that I'm also susceptible to believing in unicorns?
Mike, I don't know why you're jumping around. I'm asking you to prove that there's not a unicorn in my garage. Go ahead and do it.
I'm not talking about unicorns in your garage. I'm talking about
Mike, I'm waiting for you to prove there's not a unicorn.
We are.
We're talking about unicorns in my garage. Prove that it isn't there.
Why are you guys distracting from the... Frank was the first caller. I see exactly where Frank was coming from. Why are you guys trying to distract from the argument? My argument was...
You just said a second ago, that we would need to prove your God isn't real. That's what you said. You said that we need to prove your God isn't real.
Wait. No, I didn't say that, and I didn't even infer that. Okay? What I said...
You very much did. We heard you. We were here.
Rewind the tape.
Hold on. Now you're going to cut me off? What I said was that I understand that God is real, and I want you guys to tell me in your expertise and your experience how I come to know that. Now, I wasn't raised in church. I'm not highly suggestible. What else do you have?
So you did what you said, and I remember you saying it, man, is that and our expertise and all this other stuff give us our reasons why your God isn't real, and then that would prove you wrong because atheists have to prove something along those lines. So like what we're trying to show you is that that's not how that works. You don't prove a negative, right? We're not going to prove God isn't real because that's a crazy thing to try to do.
Yeah.
You can't prove there isn't a unicorn in Johnny's garage. You can't prove it. For all we know, it's real, right? But that's not actually a good reason to believe in something. You have to have positive evidence for it. You can't have negative evidence.
I understand God is real. Can you understand? Can you explain to me? Because you'd be helping me, wouldn't you? If you could tell me something that's reasonable, I would have to accept it if it's reasonable, would I not? I'm not going to argue with you. I'm not going to force an argument just for the sake of doing
you've made the claim. You've made the claim that God is real. You've got the burden. You've got the burden to prove it to us. Otherwise, we're not convinced. So what is your evidence besides it's true?
Your arguments are wrong. Hold on for a second. I never said that
I'm doing a lot of holding, and I'm not really good at holding things. Call me Butterfingers here.
I think you're distracting. I didn't say that the substance of your arguments were wrong. I said your arguments themselves were wrong. In other words, you guys put this stuff on television as if someone can actually answer these questions in a back and forth conversation of 250 words or less. You cannot. In order to be able to understand the truth and the nature of the God, no, you cannot. It cannot be done. And only someone who thought that way could not see the truth. What I'm telling you is there's something that you don't know, and what you don't know is far more important than what you think you do know.
Okay.
That's basically what Frank was
Mike, hold on. Mike, hold on a minute. Mike, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute, Mike. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay. Look, you have asserted that God is real. You know that God is real. The Bible is real. Jesus is real. Holy Spirit, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you know it, you must have reasons. So give us your reasons.
Yes, I do.
Give us your reasons. I don't care about the conclusion. Okay, experiences. Now we're getting somewhere.
I have experience.
No, wait. I'm holding on.
God is real. Okay. I have experience that tells me, well, I come to understand the truth of God's existence through my experience.
Okay. Let's hear about it. Let's hear more about it.
Now, when you ask, hold on. When you ask for evidence, I ask you, what type of evidence would you like? And I still want to know, what kind of evidence would you like?
Your best one. The best one.
The best. Top
most
tier.
Convincing one. The one that absolutely is unshakable.
No, not my best one. No, not my best one. See, that doesn't work that way. I said you. I don't know what it would take for you to believe. I asked, what type of evidence would you want to see? Not me. You.
So let's start with, because like I could go down that road for a long time, but it would be unproductive. So let's start with, what is a form of evidence that you have that I can test and repeat in a laboratory setting to make sure that that's actually what's happening and it's not anything else?
Wait a minute. You made a statement saying that God isn't real unless there's some kind of evidence. I just asked you what kind of evidence you want, and now you're flipping it back on me. Do you know what kind of evidence you were looking for?
Like that's you just asked me what kind of evidence I want. I said, give me some evidence that I can put in a laboratory setting and test. Like actual evidence, empirical evidence.
Evidence such as what? Like what?
So here's the thing. See, this, I didn't want to get into this because I feel like it would be unproductive, but I feel like it's probably a good idea. Is that here's the truth of it, okay? And you're gonna, I promise you, you're gonna want to jump in here, but please just let me finish. Is I don't 100% know what kind of evidence would convince me that there is a God, because I know for sure that if I were to go show my cell phone to a Neanderthal a couple 100,000 years ago, they would certainly think that this was magical. And so, like, if you showed me, like, if there actually was, if the clouds parted and God came down, was like, yo, what up? I'm Yahweh. I wouldn't know that that isn't actually some sort of super advanced technology, maybe an alien, maybe some time travel. It could be a lot of things. Like, I don't know for sure what would rule out every possibility and just leave it has to only be God. However, you know who does know what kind of evidence would convince me is God. If God is real, then that thing would know exactly what to do to convince me 100%. So, like, the fact that there isn't evidence that convinces me is more of a failing on his part than mine.
Okay. In other words, what you're saying, such evidence would have to be particularized to you so that you understand it, that it is God and not anything else, correct?
Yes, it would have to be something that I could test in a laboratory and, like, make sure that it is 100% only this thing. Because that's the whole point of doing, science, is that you're trying to prove yourself wrong. You never accept a hypothesis in science. You fail to reject a hypothesis. And so if you get to a point where you're like, I can no longer, no matter what I throw at this thing, it's still standing, I can't go with anything else, then that's the only time that you move forward with that idea. And you do it until you can knock it down. And so, like, if there was such evidence, then sure, I'd be the first one to sit here and say, yes, absolutely, God is real. I would still say I don't like him, but I would absolutely say that he's real.
Okay, and then Mike, just following on what Forrest said, following on what Forrest said. No, hold on, Mike, hold on.
There's two of us, please.
Yeah, there's two of us. So Forrest gave you an answer of what would be evidence that he would accept. What would be evidence that you would accept that God doesn't exist?
That God, I can't. That would be impossible. I understand what I understand right now. That would be impossible.
You know what I mean?
It would be impossible.
So Forrest is open, and you're.
How can I entertain the idea? Wait a minute. Allow me to answer.
I'm holding, Mike.
Affirmatively. Well, if I understand affirmatively that he exists, right, it would be impossible for me to believe otherwise if I understand this. See, this is not just something I know. This is not an abstract belief I form, as you guys would suggest. But this is something that I understand. See, the truth doesn't have to be what you say it is. It's got nothing to do with what I think is true or what I believe. The truth just is. And I just happen to be giving testimony to the truth to you. Now, I know that might seem like a humorous thing, but here's the thing. When I asked you a little while ago what kind of evidence you wanted, you basically said, tell God to give me evidence that I can test in the laboratory. Now, not only is that a ridiculous idea because God doesn't work that way, I think the answer you're looking for is some kind of proof that lets you know, regardless of what everybody else thinks, that lets you know without a shadow of a doubt that is indeed God and that it is empirically so. Not just with you.
Literally the exact same thing that I would expect from anything else. Yes.
Yeah.
Literally the exact same parameters that I would expect for any other thing.
And you're still living, Forrest. You're still alive.
Hold on.
You haven't lived your whole life.
Right.
Okay. You haven't lived your whole life, died, been able to take notes, and then come back and turn on the cameras to say for affirmatively so, yes, God does not exist. So to say that I'm going to die an atheist, you don't know that. You have no idea what's going to happen in the future. Okay? Just up until this point in your life, you have not been exposed to the nature of the truth.
I have no reason to believe that I will be changing my mind, but I'm always open to new information. If there is, if you can prove this God, if you can prove this God, then I'm into it. I'll absolutely believe in this God if you can prove it. And then I will be right here on this show saying the exact same things about how evil he is, but I'll believe he's real.
Yeah. Mike, you have an understanding.
I can't do that. I don't think any person can do that. I think that's impossible.
Mike, you have an understanding. You know that God exists, or you claim, and you have an understanding that God exists. And I don't know what the real difference is between the two of those, but I would like for you to present to us the strongest evidence that you have that proves to you that God exists, and we'll listen to your reason for why God exists, and then we'll ask you some questions about it. That's a lot of times how that works. Okay, so what is the strongest piece of evidence that convinces you that God exists? Now, I'm going to warn you, we've heard a lot of different arguments over the years, and we've probably heard what convinces you before, and it didn't convince us, but Forrest and I have open hearts. And so we're open to hearing it. Maybe coming from you, it'll be a different outcome. But unless you give us something very specific explaining, and I'm holding on for you once you do this, I'm going to hold on. Give us your best argument, your best evidence, and we'll listen to it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so enough with the proselytizing or whatever you want to call it. Just give it to us, and we'll have a conversation. So go ahead.
I was a bigger skeptic than you both.
You don't know how big my skepticism is.
I've listened to your shows. I've listened to you talk. I've heard the extent of your skepticism. Believe me, I was a bigger skeptic than you. I'm very solidly grounded in reality, science, not even though I'm a big science fiction buff, but I know how to separate the science from the fiction. So that changed one day.
Okay, it changed.
So I was forced to reconcile what I understood about the natural world with what I just learned about the spiritual realm. Now, I've never heard you guys talk about that. You never talk about how can someone go from thinking one way and all of a sudden think another way? Wouldn't that make me double-minded? Or did I all of a sudden just say,
too.
God is great, and that's it. Everything else, all logic falls out. Everything falls out the door, all science and everything. Is that what I did?
No, you were
How did I
convinced
reconcile
of
this two?
something. You were convinced of something, but that's still not that. You haven't given us your actual argument, because I did the same thing you did in reverse. I used to believe in a lot of magical stuff because that's how I was raised. And then I realized I had a different set of rules for that than I did for literally everything else. And the second I started asking questions about those things, they fell apart. And so now I don't believe in any magical things, and I strictly believe in things that I have evidence for. And I know that there are plenty of other hosts on the show that were very much Christian, that were in your camp, that believed in the Christian God and the devil and all these things, and that now don't, because the same reason they asked questions and they fell apart. So, like, you don't have to have two minds to just change your mind. You were convinced by something. I don't know what convinced you. You haven't told us what convinced you yet.
That's why we keep asking you over and over.
Johnny just asked, what's your best argument? Like, just give us that.
And Forrest asked you before that. So what is it now?
All right. Up on people, and then
we're holding up. Mike, we're holding.
We're holding on.
Are you? Can I talk? I told you. I was a skeptic. Wait a minute. Let me finish. How could I go from being a skeptic and the next day understanding that God was real? How could that happen unless I was?
So your reason for believing, just so I understand. So just so I understand, we've asked you several times, what is your best evidence that God is real? And so far you've said over and over, I didn't believe in God, and then I now believe in God. So your reason for believing in God is that you believe in God?
He talked to me. No, he talked to me. That's how I'm got in the body of Christ.
Okay, here we go. All right. So God spoke to you. That's what you know.
I gotta let go. My grip is slipping. Okay. So you heard the voice of God.
Off. You just don't know it.
You don't know how off I am. I was more off than you ever were.
The Holy Spirit. Hold on. Yeah, right. The Holy Spirit.
We're holding on.
reveals things to you. That's God's work. Right. The Holy Spirit reveals things through us. And then that's the way that God speaks to us.
So let me ask you this now, Mike, because like Johnny said, we're going to hear your point and we're going to ask some questions. Like, here's the big question that I have for you is, what do you say to every other religion across the world throughout history that also said that Allah or Krishna or Bhagavad, or not Bhagavad God, or I will say the freaking holy book, that Allah or Krishna or Quetzalcoatl or Ea or whoever else revealed themselves to them? Yeah, exactly. Why don't you believe the people who said Zeus spoke to me and revealed himself to me in all these ways, and then I wasn't a believer and now I'm a believer because Zeus showed me? Why is that not convincing to you?
Well, first of all, because it wasn't Muhammad or Buddha or Krishna or anybody else that spoke to me. It was through Jesus Christ. And until Muhammad goes up on the cross and sacrifices himself, or Buddha sacrifices himself, or somebody else voluntarily sacrifices himself, those are man-made religions as far as I know. I'm not a biblical scholar.
And all of those people would say it wasn't Jesus or God that came to me. It was Muhammad or Buddha or Krishna or whoever, even though you don't worship Buddha that way, but whatever. Like, they would all say the exact same thing.
Too, either, did he? And besides, the Quran leads to the Bible. Did Buddha go get sacrificed for our sins? Did Muhammad get sacrificed for our sins? Did any of these other people be religious actually make a voluntary blood sacrifice for our sins?
So actually, yes, there are lots of religions that include like sacrifice for other people, especially for like humans. There's a lot of those, especially like South American indigenous religions have a lot of stories like that. Yeah.
All right, check this out, dude. I'm going to cut it short. I'm starting a 6-part series called The Miracle of Rebirth. I'm going to be making some shows.
And we're done. I'm going to go ahead and drop the call there, Mike, because I'm not going to let you sell your stuff here on TV, on our show. But yeah, just over it was 20 minutes. 20 whole minutes of just, what's your evidence? I believe it. Right, but why do you believe it? Because I believe it.
You got to go through parts 1 through 5 before you get to the very end, and then you find out that he had the experience. Yeah.
Oof. Before we move on, once again, we've got some super chats. Mike L.A. Whaley says, the mics of the universe denounced this Mike religion for the lack of common sense. Then he also said, Mike zero atheist 5 bazillion. There's a lot of zeros there. Let's see here. Nasisis said, Mike, evidence is claim dependent. Just trying to remind Mike that evidence is claim dependent. And then Mike L.A. Whaley came back. You're donating a lot of money today. Thank you so much. Said, on behalf of the evolved parts of humanity, we present this gift for Johnny and Forrest, a steak dinner. That's very kind of you to send some super chat cash. Nice. Also, if you can arrange to be in the Austin area between February 23rd and 26th, please consider joining us for the in-studio audience at the ACA Free Thought Library for live broadcasts of Secular Sexuality, Truth Wanted, Talk Heathen, and the Atheist Experience. Doors open at 6 p.m. on Thursday and Friday, at noon on Sunday. Parking is where you can find a legal spot. After a lot is full, it fills up very fast. It's a very small lot. If you can't make it there this month, that's totally fine, because we'll continue to broadcast live from the library the last week of every month. So keep watching the show and watching our website at atheist-community.org for news and information as we expand our in-studio offerings in the future. And speaking of being in the local Austin area, as we said at the very beginning of the show, if you do live in Austin, or if you're Austin area adjacent, we're in need of crew and cast members for the shows. So if you're interested in assisting with video, audio call-in screening, or anything else, you can attend our live call-in shows. Please email us at tv@atheist-community.org, and the production team will be in touch with you promptly. Now, we've already been going for about the full time. We've only got about 10 minutes left in the show, but we have a million good calls left, and I want to get to like at least one, maybe two more. Johnny, what kind of are you on a time crunch here? Can you?
I'm not. I'm good. I'm cool. I can keep going. I will be in the studio next month, by the way. For those of you who want to, say hi.
Oh snap! That's awesome. Okay, well, if it's okay with you, then since we have the time, I'm going to quickly take this call, and it'll be pretty brief. This is Emery from California wants to talk about how we can explain being gender non-binary scientifically. Emery, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm awesome. So really quickly, is there anything particular, like, is that a pretty good summary? You just like what I've got here is just how do we explain gender non-binary scientifically? Is there anything specific that you wanted to touch on before we dig into that really quickly?
Yeah. So I'm non-binary. That's how I identify, and I've seen a bunch of your videos. I've watched your stuff. I've saw the sex and sensibility video and stuff, and I've seen a lot of different ways that people explain transness through science and stuff, and I love science. And so first I'm just kind of curious, because oftentimes when we have these conversations, it's about binary transitions. And so I was just firstly wondering what type of science and stuff we have behind that. And then also kind of what should we do with that knowledge? Because a lot of trans people feel scared when we start talking too scientifically about what transness is, because then we would have to prove ourselves. We would have to show this, oh, well, we are actually trans or whatever. And or people could take that knowledge and then try to convert us and things like that. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question about what science do we have to kind of explain gender non-binary, and then what is a good way to kind of deal with that knowledge?
Right. So really quick, I would just point out, if this would be the train of speaking that I would use. Number one is that sex and gender are different things, right? They're completely different realms of thinking and realms of science. Gender is a social construct. It is not a biological construct. You cannot reduce gender down, nor can you assume or predict gender from biological sex. And this is something a lot of people get touchy about. And you can point to, pick your favorite science book. Just about this is one that I read on this show before. This is Genetics: A Conceptual Approach by Benjamin Pierce. This is actually the textbook that I used in my undergrad to study genetics. This was, assigned to me by my university. And it says right here in chapter 4.1, sex is determined by a number of different mechanisms. So there's not just one on-off switch for sex. There's a million different ways that sex is determined, not a single one of which only has two options. And then here it says in this last paragraph, gender is not the same as sex. Biological sex refers to the anatomical and physical phenotype physiological phenotype of an individual. Gender is a category assigned by the individual or others based on behavior and cultural practices. One's gender need not coincide with one's biological sex. So that's biology right there. You can also point to anthropology, which is a field of biology because humans are, animals. I study bioanthropology. That's what I do. And here in this anthropology textbook from Oxford University Press by Robert Lavenda and Emily Schultz, you've got a whole thing on here about how many anthropologists did some significant research throughout the 20th century that demonstrated that culturally shaped gender roles considered appropriate for males and females in a given society could not be reduced to or predicted by the biological sex of an individual. I didn't know that's where I got that phrasing. Apparently, I just remembered that from this book, which is whether determined by anatomy, physiology, chromosomes, or anything else. Today, anthropologists, along with others, call into question the assumption that human beings come in two and only two biological sexes and that gender roles are built from those sexes, and it goes on and on to talk about the difference between sex and gender there. And so, this isn't like, I'm not going to sit here and say this isn't controversial. Of course it is. It's a politically salient topic, but it's not like scientifically controversial, or at least not as much as a lot of people like to pretend. This is just how things are. And so when you talk then about being non-binary or being, a different gender besides what we would call boy or girl, I would then point to the fact that there are countless cultures across history and across the globe that have more than two genders. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now on the YouTubes. You can go to, if you just Google, if you're watching this later on, you can look up PBS map of gender of societies with more than two gender. Map of gender diverse cultures is what this page is called, from pbs.org, and it's an interactive map that shows, like a couple dozen different cultures from around the world that have more than two genders, that have a third or maybe even a fourth gender. And sometimes that includes being trans, and sometimes it kind of doesn't. And sometimes, being non-binary is something that actually we see being recognized throughout the world. And so, when you're presented with that knowledge, and when you're presented with the archaeological theory of understanding this kind of this ontology of gender, you either need to decide that either one predominant cultural idea of gender has steamrolled over the planet and wiped out through genocide and forced conversion all of these other gender ideologies as much as they possibly can, which is something that we have a tremendous amount of historical evidence for. Or the alternative hypothesis is all of these other cultures were just blue-haired liberals and they don't know anything about science. And that just doesn't really seem reasonable to me. So that would be the way that I would present that to somebody. If somebody wanted to talk about non-binary gender from a scientific perspective, I would first give them the scientific facts that sex and gender are different things, and that it's currently something that isn't something that can be built upon just this simple on-off switch in any department. And that gender is something that changes from person to person, from culture to culture, from day to day. Sometimes it means different things. Yeah. And here's a bunch of other cultures out there. And then I would dig into, because it's my field, I would dig into the archaeology of gender and whatnot. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Or is there more that you wanted to get into?
Yes. But I think where my question kind of comes from is I've heard when you're explaining this to other people who don't really have that understanding, I've heard you bring up how people's brains look differently, and oftentimes trans people will have quote unquote the brain of a woman in a quote unquote man's body, and that's the type of rhetoric that's a little bit scary for some people, because one, that excludes non-binary people, and two, it's people can use that then to oh, well, let's fix the brain, transness isn't natural, or whatever the dumb argument they come up with is,
Right. So there's I am not a neuroscientist. I've spoken on this briefly in the ways that I'm able to from my experience. I always recommend this book called Evolution's Rainbow by Dr. Joan Roughgarden, who goes into some detail about that. But also, if you wanted to, this is another thing. I'll put this in the chat again so that people can see it easily. And if you want to look it up, you can as well. You can go to YouTube and just look up. There's a guy named Robert Sapolsky. He's a neuroendocrinologist, neurobiologist out of Stanford University, as is Joan Roughgarden. And he's got a few videos. I'm putting one right here on brain gender and kind of the pathway from chromosomes to gonads to endocrine systems to genitals to secondary sexual characteristics, and how every single bit of that can go haywire. And then here's like a 10-year-old lecture as well about how neural architecture tends to differ and be more representative of what you might expect from a person's gender identity rather than what their genitalia tells you. However, it is really important. The reason why I'm careful talking about that is because it's really important to remember that there is no such thing as a boy brain and a girl brain. It's just like kind of some minor differences that we see that we can kind of point to. And again, can't stress this enough. Not saying it isn't controversial, just saying that there's a lot of good data out there. And what we're seeing right now, as far as I can tell, is that there's less of a clash of science versus science and more of a clash of like our scientific understanding of these things clashing with our cultural understanding of these things. And unfortunately, there are a lot of really great scientists who are caught up in the cultural understanding of things. And that's a bold thing for me to say, but it's the honest truth of what I've been seeing. It's just like, we have kind of some outdated ideology getting in the way of modern ideas, if that makes any sense. If I go any farther with that kind of line of thinking, though, however, you could power a small city, but by the power of my smugness, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, that's pretty much everything that I would have for this little section. I just wanted to, you've been waiting for so long, and that was a great question. I wanted to get it in there, but like, does that answer everything for you today, Emery?
Yeah, I guess my second part of the question was like kind of how, like what we do sort of with that. But I think you may have kind of answered that with like, basically starting with the science and then kind of being like, gender doesn't have anything to do with that and stuff like that. But
that's the way I would explain it. But like, as far as what we do with it culturally, I would say we get out of our own way and get out of our ethnocentric little box and start,
right.
stop by the narrow heuristics that we were taught as kids. It's the same reason why, when somebody goes to, well, and somebody goes to middle school and they learn, there's 3 states of matter. No, there fucking aren't. And it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a fourth one, and you can have more than one at the same time. You can have a triple point where it's all 3 of them at the same, it's a lot more interesting. And you've got this group of people here saying, no, damn it, it's 3 state, it's only solid, liquid, or gas. And that's exactly what we're seeing here, is it's a lot more interesting than what you learned in middle school. And we've got a bunch of people saying, no, damn it, I learned it in middle school. It's like, no, there's more than that.
And the reason why it's different, the reason why there is... Well, real quick, Emery, I think the reason why we look at the 3 states of matter differently, politically speaking, than the reason why we look at the binary structure of gender politically is because, and I think you will look out the window and you will see that we live, at least I do, I know you do as well, in the United States, a country that is dominated by frankly, a form of Christianity, one form of Christianity or another, that pretty much controls the narrative that is overrepresented in legislatures across the country, and therefore is calling the shots, and in a lot of ways. Although there are many people who are not religious or are not affiliated, we don't see a proportionate number of people in legislatures or an executive or even the judiciary that would reflect that. And so we have those people in large part pulling the strings of culture to push that narrative, to keep it going. And even if a person is not overtly religious, they, unlike, I think it was Mark, who is immune or not immune. He said he's not immune, but he's not influenced by cultural forces. We still live. We are immersed in the cultural reality that has been set from the past. And the culture is changing slowly over time, but it's still rooted in, I would say, a Judeo-Christian past, an understanding that has sort of taken hold. And so that's how you run into atheists who are be like, there's only 2 genders. And they might have set aside the fairy tales of their youth, they might think of it as, and they maintain a blind spot to the fairy tales of their biology teachers. Whereas they might not do the same thing with the states of matter. So we have blind spots. theists, atheists are no different in that respect. But yeah. I hope we answered your question.
I think that, yeah, and I think, these conversations are important to have. And I appreciate you taking my call and talking to me a bit about that.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for calling. Emery, I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and feel free to call back if you have any other questions for us, all right?
All right, thank you.
Take care. They seem super nice. Okay, so we've got still we got like 4 or 5 callers here, but we're gonna do maybe 1 or 2 more because I wanted to get through. They were waiting for so long, and that was such a cool question that I could tell meant something to them. So we're going to move on then to Chris calling in from him. I read it backwards. Chris calling in from New York. Pronouns are he, him. Said he has a question about the origin of life. Hi, Chris. I'm very dumb. How are you today?
I don't know what you're talking about. The weather in him is perfectly warm this time of year, so.
Oh, man.
And you were so close with some of your earlier stuff, and hello, Johnny, as well. But I specifically called for Forrest. Sorry about that. In talking with my theist friends, it does come up, the origin of life and how we go from non-life to living matter. And you were basically, I got more information with your earlier calls than I have so far, but you were so close with it. Mentioning how we have steps 1 through 200, going through with it. Is there some resource that I could look up to, or maybe you've even done a video or familiar with it that sort of goes through these steps from the Miller-Urey experiment to the first cells and then going through, just so it's easier to explain to them, okay, you go from amino acids to proteins, and then we have this experiment showing it. And then you go from proteins to, and that's in my head, I'm not biologically minded, so I don't know. So
for any layperson that's out there that wants to look this up, this is called the Astrobiology Primer. It's loose. You print it off. It's like 100 pages. It's not really that long. But it's the Astrobiology Primer. This is published by NASA. This is version 2.0 that's out right now. They are currently working on another one. One of my friends, Dr. Lena Vincent, is actually someone who is working on the new version right now. She's super cool. But anyway, you go through this, and that is just straight white paper on the screen there. I'm going to put that away because that's just blinding. But this is it's a primer into astrobiology. It tells us, in very simple terms, explains what we know about how planets form, about how solar systems work, about how stars make new heavy elements, things like that, and then also everything that we know so far about how life gets started. And this version was last up to the one I have here is from 2016. So even it's like I said, they're updating it, they're putting more stuff out there. But that's a super great resource that anybody can go look at and learn just the general idea of everything we know. And also since 2016, I don't know if they've updated it, as far as putting stuff out. I don't know what version they're on at this moment. We found those other nucleotides, those other nitrogenous bases. I think we were missing 2 of them when that was printed, 1 or 2 at least. So we have found more cool stuff. And so when I talk about the different steps, when you talk about, for example, protein, where those come from, we know that amino acids can self-assemble. We know that they can polymerize. They can form peptide chains by themselves on the microdroplet edge surface tension of microdroplets of water, like the kind of thing you would get from sea spray. And we know the cool things that they can do while they're assembled. One thing that we're missing in there is that most every single organism needs what we call homochiral amino acids, meaning they all have to be shaped in the right way. So when you have a carbon has 4 bonding sites, you have 4 different things bonded to it. When you have each one of those 4 things is different, then it's what we call chiral. It's you go into what we call stereochemistry, where depending on how you rearrange those 4 things, what order they're in, the molecule behaves differently. And so when you have the amino acids create life, you need homochirality. You need them all arranged in the same particular way, and we don't have a solid abiotic way of doing that, but we know one surely exists because we find it this way. And so just because we don't know how it works yet, we know that it does work. We just don't know how. And so that would be the step 2. We know that amino acids, that would be like step 18. We know how stars form. We know how these heavy elements form. We know how planets form. We know how these simple molecules that form amino acids form. We know how the amino acids form. We're missing this little step where exactly how they get to the state that they're in. And then we know how the amino acids go on to do protein stuff. And then we know how the proteins do other things. And like, so we have all these steps and we're missing this one. And if you had asked me that 20 years ago, we would have been missing 5. And so like, that's how it works. So that's a good resource for anybody if you want to go pick that up. And I will look up really quick to see NASA astrobiology primer. And it looks like it's the top link on the Googlies. And here's the Astrobiology Primer, 2nd edition, published in 2016. Free download link right there. It looks like it's the same one that I've got. They haven't updated it much, but they are working on, as far as I know, version 3.0 right now. So yeah, that's a cool thing that anybody can look up.
That's definitely something I'll look through. And I tried Googling it myself, but I didn't know what terms to look for. And one of those things, I don't know what I don't know. So I figure
I just put it in the chat, and I'm going to put.
So.
I'm going to put the NASA website in the chat too there as well, so you have both versions if you want. But yeah, literally just Google NASA Astrobiology Primer, and here it is: Astrobiology at NASA, Life in the Universe, 1st edition or 2nd edition. You download it for free, and like I said, it's not very long at all. You can read it or print it out, sit there with a highlighter, and just read it through it. That's exactly what I did during it was the middle of OChem class when I was supposed to be paying attention to how to do friggin' hydroxy acids and things or whatever the hell it was. I don't even remember because I wasn't paying attention because I was doing that.
All right. Well, I'll let you go on to other callers. Thank you so much for answering my question. You guys have a wonderful night.
Hey, thanks so much. And thank you for waiting for 2 hours to ask that question. I'm so sorry it took so long. All right. So we have a few left, but I'm gonna go ahead and we're already a little bit over time, so we're gonna go for one more. Let me read the super chats really quick before we get into the last one here. We've got Sid Allman says Johnny and Forrest. Oh God, stop moving. How dare you to ask clarifying questions? The evidence is obvious. Jessica Ashworth says, thanks for civil discourse and not patronizing callers. I appreciate it. I do miss Matt Dillahunty, and watching his goodbye on his channel broke my heart. I'd like to hear a genuine response from Atheist Experience. I have no comment there because that's not my response to give.
Well, I'll say this. He's my friend, and we remain friends, and I appreciate everything he's done for the Atheist Experience, and I wish him best on his future endeavors.
I think that's a fine thing to say. He is also a friend of mine. I'll be on his show over on the Line Network on this following Wednesday. I'll be doing the hang up with him. So as far as I know, Matt has no bad blood with any of the hosts or anything like that. I don't think there's any, anything that any of us would say that would be worth the time to put on the internet. Yeah. And then we've got, actually that was it. That was the last super chat. It looks like for right now. So we've got we're going to do one more call really quickly, and then this will be the end of the show because we're already 11 minutes overtime now. We've got Emmanuel, pronouns he, him, calling from Texas. Now, I've talked to Emmanuel a few times and gotten nowhere. So, Johnny, I would love for you to talk to Emmanuel, who says that faith is evidence and scripture is correct. Emmanuel, you're on with Johnny. I'll be here if you need me.
Hey, Emmanuel, we've spoken before. So,
you've spoken to him too?
Yeah. How is faith evidence, and evidence of what?
Okay. By the way, can I read a passage?
Oh dear.
I don't see why it would be important, but it's your call, Johnny. Go for it.
How long is this passage you want to read? Is it 3 sentences?
Okay. Thank you. So,
go ahead. Make
Hello?
it quick. Make it quick. Go ahead.
Okay. So it says that now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we don't see. This is what the ancients were commanded for. By faith, we understand the universe was formed by God's command.
Okay.
So,
my response to that is cool story. So I don't care what it says written in the Holy Bible. I only care what convinces me. And so that always read to me like a bit of gibberish. So tell me how faith is evidence for the existence of God, specifically your God and not
Okay.
any other God.
Okay. So, first of all, I would like to say that God admits that there are other gods. That's why he says, don't worship any other gods except for, the God of Israel. So I do recognize that there are other gods.
So you're a
but here's the
polytheist
thing.
of some sort?
No. There are different gods, but there's only one creator. So,
So
Satan
what is your
full
evidence
God
for
in
your
John
evidence for
chapter
that is
7.
your evidence for that is
sorry?
faith itself?
No. That's what I was getting into. So how I know that, God is like evidential and that Christian doctrine is consistent, and how I know that, everything in scripture that is commanded is like ethical is probably like, how I see society,
Yikes. You're kidding me. Everything that's that's scriptural is ethical. So I
see
may
you.
take it's like low-hanging fruit. So I may take my slaves from the nation around me. So watch out, Canada and Mexico. I'm gonna go get slaves. And the Bible says that's A-okay. You don't mean that, Emmanuel, right? That's not what you mean. Or is it?
Oh, okay. So what you just said, that is found, in Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25, is actually an Old Testament commandment. So,
So
what
are all
God,
the Ten Commandments, by the way.
commanded Israel.
So yeah,
I'm sorry?
all the other commandments are Old Testament as well. And isn't Jesus sent to redeem us for original sin?
Yeah, because we are all sinners and we are worthy of death. So Jesus came and took the punishment that we deserve.
How does
so
that work?
We could believe in
how does that work? So can I, let's say you punch somebody in the face, can I forgive you for that person?
No.
Is that work?
No, you can't.
No, I can't. Okay, but Jesus can die for my sins.
Yes, because he's sinless.
Okay.
Because he's sinless. You
how
cannot
does that
take
work?
Okay, so like a
Yeah, how does that
baby,
work?
a
Yeah.
newborn baby could forgive you for somebody else because they are sinless.
good
They're
one,
just
yeah.
born. They haven't done anything.
That's right. Yeah.
So like, yeah.
Two human beings cannot atone for one another because we are all sinners. That's why the Bible says don't punish the fathers for the child and the child for the father's sin. But Jesus is sinless and he never committed sin or he never broke the law.
Aren't we punishing children for fathers' sins and stuff? Because we're all still being punished for like Eve and Adam sin, right?
Yeah.
No,
that's like the whole reason we're not needing.
We just got sin from Adam. We're not being punished because of the sin of Adam.
But if I don't accept, if I don't accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and personal Savior, don't I go to hell? So isn't that a kind of a punishment?
So here's the thing, right? So we all are going to face the judgment seat of Christ, right? So if we don't believe in Jesus Christ,
am I? What's
going
your
to
evidence
be,
that I will, that I'll be facing judgment? Is it in the Bible? Do you have anything outside of the Bible that would establish that I'm going to face judgment?
You're saying I have to give you a scripture that actually says you have to.
No, I asked if you had something outside the Bible to establish that I am going to be facing judgment. Do you have anything outside the Bible, or is it all just inside the Bible stuff?
2 Corinthians 5.
What about something outside the Bible?
Outside of the Bible.
Yeah.
Oh, so how I know is it's like, I feel guilty whenever, I break God's law. So whenever I commit sin, I have this guilt and conscience, and, I suffer from anxiety and depression whenever I commit sin. So
I'm sorry that you suffer from anxiety or depression.
Sin,
I would encourage you to seek out professional help because there's no shame in having anxiety or depression. And I would encourage anyone out there in the audience who deals with these psychological realities to get the help they need. I would say don't turn to religion, but find professional help. And there's a lot of free resources out there that can help you in your time of need. Emmanuel, do you think that the things that you were saying right now is very effective in convincing us that your God is real? Do you think that that's convincing, or do you think that maybe you're not doing a good job of convincing us?
Johnny, when you commit sin, don't you feel kind of bad and kind of?
I don't think I've ever committed a sin in my many years walking this earth. Yeah.
Have you ever looked at a woman with lust?
Oh yeah,
All
many
the time.
times.
All
Yeah,
the time.
many times. I try not to do it while I'm driving. What's that?
That's nice.
Yeah, but what does that? What did Jesus say about committing lust? It says
I don't really care
it's
what Jesus
adultery.
said about
Yeah.
committing lust.
Do
Honestly,
you remember what Quetzalcoatl
What?
said about lust and all that?
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Do you remember what Quetzalcoatl said about lust?
The one true God.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
so why would it matter?
No, I didn't.
watch
It's
out.
it's a belief system that we don't hold. Why would we care what this person says? Why
Yeah.
would I feel bad for violating the laws of someone who I don't respect?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll tell.
believe
I'll
to
tell.
be real, I should
I'll
say.
tell you what. I'll tell you what, Emmanuel. It doesn't sound like your God really has a system where I can make it. You know, if I make it up to
You can
heaven,
make
let's
it.
say well,
You
hang
can
on a
make it.
second,
If you
Emmanuel.
believe
Hang
in
on.
Jesus, you can make it.
Is there free will in heaven?
No, we don't have free will in heaven.
We don't have free will in heaven, so I'm some sort of strange
Awful.
robot in heaven? That sounds awful. That sounds like
Yep.
No,
I
we
have
don't
no
Sounds
mouth,
like slavery.
yet I
in
must
the-
scream
in
by
the
Robert
earth.
Heinlein. What's that?
Yeah, but we don't even have free will in earth. So why would we have free will in heaven?
So if we don't have free will here, then why do humans do evil things? Why does murder and genocide and rape and torture and pedophilia happen?
Because God predestined for everything that will happen in the world. So God planned, that we will become sinners so that He could send Christ for our punishment. So if we were
just
not
to be
sinners,
clear,
so we never did horrible things. I'm sorry.
So just to be clear, God made people rape children so that He could kill Jesus to forgive them for raping the children that He sent them and created them to rape. Unless they don't believe in Jesus, then He gets to send them to hell. But you said that God predestined everything and all the evil in the world as part of His plan.
No, but you just focused on rape. I don't think that's
Pick a different
thing.
God made Hitler to cause the Holocaust so that He could forgive Hitler with Jesus.
For God so loved the world that He created Hitler.
He made Hitler. So is that part of the plan?
No. Well, okay, here's the thing, Forrest. I'm not saying doing those things, killing and raping and all the evil things is good. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have a fallen world so that God could fix by His love. And the only way that we could do that is if we believe in Jesus. So
but just a second ago, you did say that all the evil things that happen in the world are part of God's plan. Did you not?
Our world is fallen, and it can't get up without God's love.
The question that Johnny said, because Johnny said, do we have free will in heaven? And Satan did not have free will in heaven. God actually predetermined his destruction before He made Satan.
Cool. How do you know this is true?
I want to ask a different question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I want to get to that too. Get to that too.
Forrest, you barely had a chance to talk this entire episode. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's such a weird thing to say. I just have to know. Like if you had the opportunity to like decide to have children, right? Like if you're like, I'm gonna have kids and I'm gonna love my kids very much. I am also going to hire Teddy the neighbor to come commit horrible atrocities so that my children will be convinced to join him so that I can sacrifice the dog. And that's the only way that I'll love my kids again. Like, why bake all that into the sauce? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why is that part of the plan? Why is taking away free will and making bad things happen and creating Satan and having the fall of the world and all that all necessary to get to the end goal of attempting to undo all that bad shit and doing a terrible job at it? Why is it? How does that make any sense?
Yeah, that's why Paul says the love of God is a mystery because we
Bible
can't
again.
comprehend.
The Bible, yeah. That Bible.
Sorry,
that,
okay,
you know,
no, but Johnny, I promise I'll shut up. I promise.
No,
I'll try.
I'm teasing you. Of course, you did a wonderful
it's
job.
fine.
I couldn't answer those questions. Are you kidding me? But Emmanuel, how do you know that any of this is true? You kind of just skip over that part. Why do you believe that any of this stuff is really real in the really real world? Because I don't. And what are you seeing that I'm not seeing?
Oh, so here's the thing. So I was not a Christian for a very long time. So I backed from Christianity when I was like 14 or 15. So I became really, really doubtful and skeptical of my beliefs. And I said, this gotta be a made-up thing, even though I was like raised in a religious household and all of that. But when I stopped being a Christian, I started, committing a lot of sins. And when I start committing a lot of sins, I felt a lot of guilt. So
What's a sin? What's a sin?
When I was like listening to the gospel, okay, I'm sorry.
Emmanuel, you didn't believe in any of this Jesus stuff, and then you started committing a lot of sins. What were some of the sins that you committed?
Like
if you're open to sharing, you committed lust. What was the lust that you committed? I want to know more about this lust. I think our viewers at home want to know more about the lust that you committed. Was it in your mind, or were you sleeping around?
No, I was not sleeping around. It was just like when I was at school. When I was a teenager in my high school, they used to bring like some pictures, and the pictures were kind of like explicit.
Explicit pictures, and that was the sin that you committed. Did you ever turn toward other people in a disrespectful way, such that you used them rather than treated them with respect in your sexual activities? Put it that way, in a way that was non-consensual.
No. I would never do that.
Okay. Emmanuel, I remember talking to you on Talk Heathen not all that long ago, and I remember thinking at the time that you've got a lot of things going on with your own journey through life and your own take on the reality, the metaphysics of the world. And I have to say, nothing you've said has convinced me that God is real, that sin is real, that the Bible is a trustworthy source of information, and that I need to worry about hell and damnation. So do you have one last thing you'd like to give me? What's a reason that I should believe? And don't quote the Bible, because it's not going to work. But what do you have? Do you have some other thing that maybe you have in mind that would help me believe what you believe?
Yeah, I mean, you could if you believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, I think you could receive the baptism of the Holy Ghost.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, but
Sorry.
if you do, he would give you an evidence.
Be a lot cooler if you did. Okay. Thanks.
So just to be
were you a Christian?
Yeah.
Were you a Christian?
Oh yeah, I was.
Oh, Forrest too?
Like,
oh, what type?
No, I was never a Christian. No, I'm interested in what you just said a second ago, that if we believe, then we'll be baptized in the Holy Spirit and we'll have evidence that way. So if we don't believe, we go to hell. Hell awaits if we don't believe. But in order to have the reason to believe given to us, we first need to believe. So you have to believe it in order to know why you believe it. And if you don't believe it because you don't have a reason why you believe it, then you burn for eternity. That sounds like a dumb plan.
Yeah. I think
would you like take out a car loan or anything? Would you like take out a loan on a car or a house if they're like, we'll tell you the interest rates and everything after you sign the paperwork, and otherwise we're just going to start taking money from your account? Like, would that make sense?
No, that wouldn't make sense. But Forrest, I never said, murder and, all of this atrocious things like rape, child rapist and all of it. I never said it was correct. And, God loves to.
We never said you did say that. Yeah. We never said you did say that.
Okay.
Forrest, I'm good.
Okay, I have one more quick question before we wrap up then.
Yeah.
Because like, oh my gosh, I could go all day with this, but like it won't get anywhere.
No.
Emmanuel, I have one more question for you. And actually it's two more questions.
Okay.
The first one's very brief. Very brief. Do you think that you calling us, because you've called us here, you've clearly talked to Johnny before, you've called me a couple of times over on the line on Jimmy's shows. Do you think that what you're doing is helping us maybe get closer to believing in God?
Yes, because the Lord Jesus, spoke to me a while ago, and he said that I don't have a lot of time, to be in this body. So
I agree with that.
For the rest of my life. I'm sorry.
I agree with that. I'm 30 years old. Average human lifespan in this country is around 80. So I've already used up almost half the time that I've got. I've got a lot of work to do in a very little bit of time. That's part of the reason why I'm here, trying to help people on the internet. But like, here's the thing that I want to know. It's because I understand where you're coming from. What I want to get clear to you is that like, I don't want to be a dick. I'm not trying to like laugh at you or anything like this. I know I've been smiling this whole time because I think that what you're saying is pretty silly. What you're saying, not only are you not convincing me that this God is real, you're actually, if it was possible to push me further away, you'd be doing it. Like what you're saying sounds horrible to me. It's awful and it doesn't make any sense. It sounds absolutely evil. I want nothing to do with it. So every time you call in, if it were possible to make me more of an atheist, you would be doing that. So my second question is, if this God is real, if this God really is real and really does want to save my soul and convince me of his existence, everything, why would he send you?
Oh, that's a good question, because God always manifests with people. So he sends out people. He doesn't actually reveal himself to the world.
It's just people who are doing a really, really, really bad job though.
Yeah.
Like I said, what you're doing here, you are very strongly convincing me this God is not real and that belief in this God is silly. You are making this sound less and less appealing every time you call in. So why would God send somebody that is actively making me not believe in him and not want to believe in him?
Yes, because the wisdom of God is like foolishness to us as a carnal beings.
That
the
checks
wisdom
out.
of God.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Emmanuel, long days and pleasant nights to you.
Yeah, man. We're gonna let you go. Thanks so much for calling in, as always.
Thank you.
With that, because like, man, every single sentence out of that guy's mouth could be a 30-minute call. With that, we've got one last super chat here. There's a couple actually. James Call says, homochirality was my OChem professor's proof of God. Step 4 for him. And then just as I was saying that, me and my human said, thank you for continuing to fight the good fight. Keep up the great work. Cheers. Thank you all so much for your chats. This is very kind of you. with that, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, for being here today, especially if you stayed late. I know we went almost about 30 minutes over time. So thank you so much, everybody who tuned in and stayed late and listened to everything. Please visit our website at atheist-community.org for the latest on what's been happening, and feel free to contact us at tv@atheist-community.org. It has been amazing hosting with you, Johnny. This is the first time you and I have met, first time you and I have worked together. I know most of the show was me rambling. I'm sorry about that.
No, you weren't rambling. You were doing a great job.
Well, thank you. I thought you did amazing as well. You're doing good, buddy.
You're good job. No, I learned a lot.
I think you did fantastic as well. I love your arguments.
I learned how much I don't know about this kind of stuff. And I know that a lot of people in our audience doesn't either. And so you've given them a lot to read and learn about, both our callers and our viewers. So that's fantastic.
Well, I hope to work with you again someday, man.
Yes, sir.
Really
Yes, sir.
quickly, where can people find you?
Talk Heathen, AXP, around.
Lovely.
Around. Yeah.
You can find me here and also on other shows, and also on my own YouTube channel and all those things. Find me on the YouTubes and the TikToks. Just go to valkailabs.com and it'll link you to everything that's important. And with that, just to round off the show after Emmanuel's call, I'd like to steal a line from Christy Powell. Everybody, get out there and give yourself a big old orgasm, or better yet, give somebody else one. In lust we trust. Have an awesome rest of your day, and never stop learning. Bye-bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to stop questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your lies.
Have you ever wanted to be a host on an ACA show, or be the one calling the shots behind the scenes? Are you in Austin, Texas, or at least Austin adjacent? Well, on Saturday, February 25th, make your way down to the Free Thought Library, because we'll be holding open auditions for show hosts and orientations for prospective crew members. For those wanting to be hosts, you'll be able to sit in the studio where our shows are broadcast, and we'll put you through your paces to see if you can be one of the new personalities of the ACA. For future crew members, you'll get hands-on experience using the equipment used for broadcast, and will help us record the host auditions. If you've ever dreamed of being part of the ACA productions, then this is your chance to show us what you've got. This event is free. For more information and registration, visit tiny.cc/ACA auditions.